They say laughter is the best medicine, but sometimes it's the cruelest poison. When I slipped on those wet marble steps at my husband's memorial service and crashed to the ground in my black dress, breaking my wrist and bruising my dignity. I expected sympathy. What I got instead was the sound of my own son's laughter echoing through the funeral home, not a nervous giggle or an uncomfortable chuckle, but genuine, belly-deep laughter as he pointed at me sprawled on the floor like a broken doll. "Look at the old bat," he whispered to his wife loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can't even walk straight anymore." That's when I knew my 42-year-old son Marcus had finally shone his true colors. And that's when I decided to show him. My wrist throbbed as I sat in my sunlit kitchen, the cast heavy and foreign against my lap. The house felt impossibly quiet without Harold's morning routine. No coffee grinding, no newspaper rustling, no gentle humming of old jazz standards. Just the tick of the grandfather clock he'd wound religiously for 37 years. I stared at the sympathy cards scattered across my mahogany dining table, each one a reminder of how people saw me. Poor Eleanor, dear Eleanor, sweet old Eleanor. At 73, I'd apparently become invisible to everyone except the undertaker and the tax collector. The doorbell chimed, and through the beveled glass I could see Marcus's tall frame. My heart wanted to lift. Maybe he'd come to apologize, maybe grief had made him cruel. And now he'd returned to being the son who used to bring me dandelions and call me his best girl. "Mom, we need to talk." His voice carried none of the warmth I'd hoped for as I opened the door. Behind him stood his wife, Cassandra, a sharp-featured woman who'd never liked me from the day Marcus brought her home 5 years ago. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." I gestured toward the living room, but Marcus was already walking toward the kitchen, Cassandra trailing behind him with a leather portfolio clutched to her chest. "Mom, I know this is hard, but we need to discuss your situation," Marcus began, pulling out a chair at my kitchen table without invitation. "This house is way too big for you now. The maintenance alone must be killing you." I studied his face, Harold's green eyes, my stubborn chin, but something cold I didn't recognize. "I'm managing just fine. Marcus, are you?" Cassandra spoke for the first time, her voice honeysweet with underlying steel. "Eleanor, you just fell at Harold's memorial. What if that happens here when you're alone? What if you break a hip next time?" The concern in her voice would have sounded genuine to anyone who hadn't heard her discussing my inevitable decline with Marcus at the hospital. I'd been getting pain medication when I overheard them in the hallway. "She's becoming a liability, Marcus. The sooner we get her settled somewhere safe, the better for everyone." "I've been thinking," Marcus continued, sliding a thick folder across the table toward me. "There's a beautiful assisted living facility called Sunset Manor, very upscale, perfect for someone like you." I opened the folder with my good hand. Glossy brochures showed smiling elderly people playing bingo and tending small gardens. The monthly fee made my breath catch. $8,000. Even with Harold's insurance and my savings, that would drain my accounts within 2 years. "Marcus, this is very expensive." "That's where this comes in." Cassandra's smile was razor-thin as she produced another document. "We've spoken to a realtor. Your house could easily sell for $28 million in this market. After you pay for Sunset Manor, you'll have plenty left for medical expenses and, well, whatever you need." My heart hammered against my ribs. They wanted me to sell the house Harold and I had built together, where we'd raised Marcus, where every room held 40 years of memories, the house where I'd planned to die someday, surrounded by photos and love letters and the ghost of my husband's laughter. "I don't want to sell," I said quietly. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Mom, be realistic. You can barely take care of yourself. What happens when you have another fall? What happens when you can't drive anymore, or cook, or remember to take your medications?" "I'm 73. not 93, and I'm sharper than you think, are you? Cassandra leaned forward, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. Eleanor, yesterday you called me Margaret 3 times. That was a lie, but I could see Marcus's face change, doubt creeping in. Margaret had been Harold's sister, dead for 10 years. Sign the listing agreement. Mum, Marcus said, pushing a pen toward me. Let us take care of everything. You don't need to worry about anything anymore. I looked at the pen, then at my son's face. The boy who'd once cried when I accidentally stepped on a spider was now trying to manipulate me into selling my home based on lies. The boy who'd sworn he'd always protect me was laughing at my pain and planning my exile. I need time to think, I said finally. Marcus's patience cracked. How much time? Mom, we can't wait around forever while I what? Marcus. He looked away. While you deteriorate. The word hung in the air like smoke. That's what they saw when they looked at me. Not a woman who'd built a successful interior design business. Not a mother who'd sacrificed everything for her child. Not a wife who'd loved the same man for decades. Just deterioration. Just decay. I'll consider it. I lied smoothly. Give me a week. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen and made a decision that would change everything, they thought. I was weak, confused, ready to be managed like an inconvenient piece of furniture. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. I drove my silver Mercedes to the office of Patricia Crane, Harold's longtime attorney and one of the few people who knew all our secrets. Patricia had been handling our legal affairs for 20 years, and she greeted me with the kind of genuine warmth I'd been craving since Harold's death. Eleanor, how are you holding up? She poured coffee from an elegant silver service, her grey eyes kind but sharp. That cast looks painful. It's manageable. Patricia, I need to discuss something sensitive with you, of course. Attorney-client privilege, as always. I took a breath. Harold and I never told Marcus about the Charleston properties. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. She'd helped us acquire the small empire over the years. 6 historic homes in the French Quarter that we'd restored and rented to wealthy tourists. Harold had been obsessed with keeping it secret, partly for tax reasons, but mostly because he'd grown up poor and never quite trusted anyone, even our son, with the full extent of our wealth. The rental income alone is $40,000 a month, I continued. The properties are worth approximately $85 million total. Marcus believes our net worth is tied up in the house and Harold's life insurance, and now he wants you to sell the house. I filled her in on yesterday's visit, Marcus's laughter at the memorial service, Cassandra's lies about my mental state. Patricia listened without interruption, her expression growing darker. Eleanor, what they're doing could constitute elder abuse, the pressure tactics, the lies about your competency. I don't want to prosecute my son, I said quickly, but I want to teach him a lesson he'll never forget. Patricia leaned back in her leather chair. What did you have in mind? I want you to draw up documents that show I'm selling the house, but not to some random buyer. I want Marcus to think I'm selling it to him for far below market value, as a family arrangement. Let him believe he's manipulating me into practically giving him our family home, and then I smiled for the first time since Harold's death, and then I'll show him what real manipulation looks like. Marcus owned a small but successful real estate firm in downtown Charleston, the kind of place that catered to wealthy transplants looking for Southern charm. I'd helped him buy the building 5 years ago, though he'd never quite thanked me properly for the $200,000 loan I'd never asked him to repay. Mom. He looked surprised to see me, jumping up from behind his mahogany desk. What brings you here? I've been thinking about what you said, about the house. His eyes lit up with something that might have been relief or greed. I couldn't tell which, and I think you might be right. The house is too much for me now. Each word tasted like ash, but I forced myself to continue. But I don't want to sell to strangers. I want to keep it in the family. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I mean I want to sell it to you. Sweetheart, you and Cassandra. I pulled out the fake documents Patricia had prepared for $12 million, enough to cover my expenses at Sunset Manor. But far less than market value. Consider it my early inheritance to you. I watched his face carefully as he read. The house was worth $28 million, and we both knew it. I was supposedly offering to gift him $16 million in equity. Plus the sentimental value of his childhood home. Mom, are you sure about this? His voice was carefully controlled, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. This is incredibly generous. You're my only child, Marcus. Who else would I leave it to? He called Cassandra over, and I watched them whisper in the corner of his office. When they returned, Cassandra's smile was blindingly bright. Eleanor, this is such a beautiful gesture, she gushed. And it solves everything. You get the care you need, and the house stays in the family. It's perfect. There's just one condition, I added, as if it had just occurred to me. I'd like to stay in the house for 6 months after the sale, just to transition gradually. You could charge me rent. Of course, Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about rent. Mom, you take all the time you need. They thought they were stealing from me, and they were being magnanimous about letting me pay them for the privilege. The irony was delicious. Should we go ahead and draw up the paperwork? Marcus asked, trying to sound casual. Patricia Crane is handling the legal side. We can sign next week. As I left his office, I heard Cassandra whisper to Marcus. I can't believe she fell for it. Your mother's more gullible than we thought. Oh, darling, I thought as I climbed into my Mercedes. You have no idea. The signing was scheduled for 10 a.m., and I arrived early to review the real documents Patricia had prepared. The fake sale contract looked perfect. Official letterhead, legal language, everything Marcus would expect to see. But underneath it was a very different set of papers. Are you sure about this? Ellen nodded. Patricia asked one final time. Once we set this in motion, there's no going back. I'm sure Marcus made his choice when he laughed at me on the floor. Now I'm making mine. Marcus and Cassandra arrived precisely on time, both dressed in their best business attire. Marcus carried a bottle of champagne to celebrate. He said, though he didn't specify what we were celebrating. This is such an exciting day, Cassandra said, settling into her chair with the satisfied smile of a cat who'd caught a particularly plump canary. Eleanor, I hope you know how happy this makes us, having the house stay in the family. It's what Harold would have wanted. I nearly choked on the audacity of her invoking my dead husband's name, but I managed to nod graciously. Yes, I think he'd be pleased, Patricia began explaining. The documents. Her voice professionally neutral. This is the property transfer agreement, selling the house at 1247 Magnolia Street to Marcus and Cassandra Reed for $12 million. Eleanor has agreed to owner financing with a 3% interest rate over 15 years. Marcus was practically vibrating with excitement as he signed page after page. I watched him write his name with a flourish, committing himself to what he thought was the deal of the century. And now your signature, Eleanor, Patricia said, sliding the papers toward me. I picked up the pen with my good hand and paused. Marcus, before I sign this, I want you to know how much I love you. You're my only child, my greatest achievement. Everything I've ever done has been for you. His face softened for a moment. And I saw a flicker of the little boy who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. I love you too, Mom. Good, I said, and signed my name with a steady hand, because you're going to need that love to get through what happens next. The confusion in his eyes was immediate. What do you mean? Patricia cleared her throat. Marcus, I need to explain something about the documents you just signed. What about them? You didn't purchase your mother's house, Patricia said calmly. You purchased 1247 Magnolia Street, which is the small rental cottage Eleanor owns 3 blocks away. Current value, approximately $120,000. You've just agreed to pay $12 million for it, with a binding 15-year mortgage at 3% interest. The color drained from Marcus's face. That's impossible. We were buying Mom's house. No, I said quietly. You were buying what you thought was my house. There's a difference. Cassandra grabbed the papers, scanning them frantically. This can't be legal. You tricked us. Actually, Patricia continued, it's completely legal. The address was clearly stated in all documents. You both signed willingly, without coercion. The contract is binding. But we thought, Marcus started. You thought you were taking advantage of a confused old woman. I finished. You thought you were stealing my home for half its value while shipping me off to die in some facility. You thought I was too stupid to notice. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Mom, that's not. We were trying to help you. Were you helping me when you laughed as I lay bleeding on the floor at your father's memorial? My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. Were you helping me when your wife lied about my mental state? Were you helping me when you tried to pressure me into selling my home? We can cancel this, Cassandra said desperately. We'll go to court. No judge will uphold this. Patricia smiled coldly. Actually, any judge would uphold this. Your husband just purchased a property at above market value from a willing seller. That's called a bad business decision, not fraud. You've lost your mind. Marcus snapped at me, his facade finally cracking completely. You crazy old woman, you've lost your goddamn mind. And there it was, the truth he'd been hiding behind fake smiles and false concern. In his eyes, I saw not love or respect, but rage at being outsmarted by someone he'd already written off as weak and senile, perhaps. I said, standing slowly from my chair, but I haven't lost my house. I was in the garden when I heard the car pull up. Through the jasmine vines, I could see Marcus climbing out of his BMW, his face dark with anger, but it wasn't him that made my heart sink. It was the small figure that emerged from the passenger seat. Emma, my 16-year-old granddaughter, Marcus's daughter from his first marriage. She'd been living with us part-time since her mother moved to California, and she was one of the few bright spots left in my world. Emma had Harold's gentle nature and my stubborn streak, and I'd always hoped she'd inherited our values as well. But as she walked toward the house beside her father, her usual warm smile was nowhere to be seen. Grandmother Eleanor, she said formally when I opened the door. Not Nana like she'd called me since she could talk, not even Grandma, just my full name. Like I was a stranger. Hello, sweetheart, this is a surprise. Marcus pushed past me into the hallway. Emma has something to say to you. My granddaughter's young face was flushed with what looked like righteous anger. Grandmother, I can't believe what you did to Dad today. He told me everything. Did he? I kept my voice calm, though my heart was breaking. And what exactly did he tell you? That you tricked him into signing papers for the wrong house. That you lied to him and cheated him out of millions of dollars. Her voice cracked with emotion. How could you do that to your own son? I looked at Marcus over her head. Is that really what you told her? It's the truth, he said coldly. You committed fraud, and I'm going to prove it. Emma stepped closer to me, her eyes bright with tears. Dad showed me the calculations. You cost him almost $1 million today. $1 million. Do you know what he could have done with that money? How many people he could have helped? The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus, who just tried to manipulate me into selling my home for his own benefit, was now painting himself as a humanitarian wronged by his greedy mother. Emma, I said gently, there are things about this situation you don't understand. Then explain it to me. She shouted, and I saw so much of myself in her passion that it took my breath away. Explain how you can live with yourself after stealing from your own family. She can't explain it, Marcus said, putting a protective arm around Emma's shoulders. Because there's no excuse for what she did. I've tried to be patient with her, to help her through Dad's death, but this is too much. I'm moving in with Dad full-time, Emma announced. Her chin raised defiantly. I won't live with someone who'd hurt her own family like this. The words hit me like physical blows. Emma had been my companion through the long evenings since Harold's death, helping me cook dinner and listening to my stories about her grandfather. She was the only person left who truly loved me, and now Marcus had poisoned her against me. Emma, please, I started, but she was already walking toward the door. I'm disappointed in you. Grandfather would be ashamed. After they left, I sat in Harold's recliner and let the tears come. I'd expected Marcus's anger, even Cassandra's threats of legal action. But I hadn't prepared for the possibility that my revenge would cost me Emma's love. Harold's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, was it worth it, Ellie? Was your pride worth losing her? For the first time since this began, I wasn't sure. The meeting had been Marcus's idea, mediated by Patricia at his request. He'd brought a different lawyer, a stern man named Howard Black who specialized in elder abuse cases. They thought they'd found their angle. Mrs. Reed, Howard Black began without preamble. My client believes you took advantage of his grief and concern to defraud him of nearly $2 million. In dollars, that's an interesting theory. Patricia replied smoothly, do you have any evidence of fraud? The whole thing was obviously a setup. A mentally competent person doesn't sell a $120,000 property for $12 million without some kind of coercion or deception. I'd remained silent through their accusations, but now I spoke for the first time. Mr. Black, do you believe a mentally competent person tries to manipulate their elderly mother into selling her home for far below market value? Howard Black frowned. That's not what happened here, isn't it? I opened the folder I'd brought with me. Patricia, would you please read the first document aloud? Patricia lifted a typed page. This is a transcript of a conversation recorded on August 15th, in the kitchen of Eleanor Reed's home. The speakers are identified as Marcus Reed and Cassandra Reed. That's illegal. Marcus shouted, you can't record people without their permission. Actually, Patricia said calmly, in South Carolina, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. Eleanor was present and consented. She began to read. Marcus. Read, Mom, be realistic. You can barely take care of yourself. Cassandra Reed. Eleanor, yesterday you called me Margaret 3 times. Marcus Reed, sign the listing agreement. Mom, let us take care of everything. You don't need to worry about anything anymore. Marcus's face was red. Those conversations were taken out of context, were they? I pulled out another document. What about this recording from the hospital, when you thought I was getting pain medication? Patricia read again. Cassandra Reed, she's becoming a liability. Marcus, the sooner we get her settled somewhere safe, the better, for everyone. Marcus Reed, I know. But we have to be careful about how we approach it. We can't make it look like we're just after her money. The room went dead silent. Howard Black was staring at his client with new understanding, while Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. And finally, I said, pulling out a photograph, we have this image from Harold's memorial service, taken by the funeral home photographer. The photo showed me on the ground in my black dress, my wrist bent at an unnatural angle, my face twisted in pain. In the background, Marcus was clearly visible, not helping, not concerned, but laughing, actually laughing at his mother's suffering. Mrs. Reed, Howard Black said quietly, I think there may have been a misunderstanding about the facts of this case. Oh, there's been no misunderstanding, I replied. My son and his wife tried to manipulate me into selling my home by lying about my mental competency and pressuring me when I was vulnerable with grief. When that didn't work fast enough, they invented a scheme to buy it themselves for far below market value, thinking they were taking advantage of a confused old woman. But you outsmarted them, Howard. Black said, a note of what might have been admiration in his voice. I taught them a lesson about underestimating their elders. Marcus finally found his voice. Mom, please, let's just cancel the whole thing. I'll tear up the contract. You keep your house. And we'll pretend none of this happened. No, Marcus. You signed a legally binding contract. You'll honor it. I can't afford to pay $12 million for a $120,000 house. It'll bankrupt me. I pulled out one final document. Actually, you can afford it, quite easily. Patricia read the header. Financial disclosure for Marcus Reed, including all assets, income, and debts. Marcus went pale. How did you get that? I'm still on several of your business accounts from when I helped you buy your building. I said calmly, I've been watching your finances for years, Marcus. I know about the $400 you've saved by paying yourself through your corporation. I know about the investment account you've hidden from Cassandra. I know about the second mortgage you took on your office building to fund your gambling habit. That's invasion of privacy. That's a mother keeping track of her son, I corrected. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to honor the contract you signed. You're going to pay fair market rent for that cottage, $800 a month, and you're going to refinance the loan through a bank, which will reduce your payments considerably. Marcus was breathing heavily, and if I refuse, then I'll file elder abuse charges against both you and Cassandra. I'll make sure every real estate agent in Charleston knows how you treat elderly clients. I'll make sure Emma learns the truth about what you really said at that hospital. I leaned forward, and I'll make sure you never see another penny of my money again, not in loans, not in gifts, not in my will. The threat of being cut off from my money hit him like a physical blow. Marcus had been counting on his inheritance for years, making financial decisions based on future wealth that he now realized might disappear. This is blackmail, Cassandra whispered. No, I said firmly, this is consequences. Howard Black closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. I think my services are no longer needed here. Mrs. Reed, you have my apologies for wasting your time. After the lawyers left, Marcus sat slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the memorial service. I'm sorry about pressuring you. I'm sorry about all of it. I studied his face, looking for genuine remorse. What I saw was mostly self-pity and fear of financial consequences. Marcus, do you remember when you were 7 and you broke Mrs. Patterson's window with your baseball? He nodded reluctantly. You lied to me about it, said the ball just slipped. But when I found out the truth, do you remember what I told you? That lying makes everything worse. And do you remember what your punishment was? I had to pay for the window with my allowance money, and I had to go apologize to Mrs. Patterson. Exactly. You had to face the consequences of your choices and make things right. I stood up slowly. Nothing's changed. Sweetheart, you're still my son, but you still have to face the consequences. He looked up at me with Harold's eyes, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to help me bake cookies and tell me I was the prettiest mom in the world. Are we going to be okay? He asked quietly. That depends on you, Marcus. That depends entirely on you. I was frosting Emma's favorite chocolate cake when I heard the tentative knock on my back door, through the screen. One could see her silhouette, smaller and more hesitant than usual. Nana, the childhood name, made my heart skip. Can I come in? Of course, sweetheart. I was just finishing your cake. She slipped inside, her eyes red-rimmed and uncertain. You remembered my birthday. I've never forgotten one of your birthdays. Emma, I wasn't about to start now. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before she burst into tears. I'm so sorry, Nana. I'm so sorry. I wrapped her in my arms, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for. Yes, I do. Dad told me the truth about what he said at the hospital, about the memorial service, about everything. Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. He showed me the recordings. I can't believe I called you a thief when he was the one trying to steal from you. I held her tighter. Emma, your father isn't a bad man. He just lost his way for a while. How can you defend him after what he did? I led her to the kitchen table, the same table where this whole mess had started, because he's my son, and because everyone deserves a chance to make things right, but he laughed at you. When you were hurt and scared, he laughed, the pain in. Her voice told me she was thinking about her own relationship with Marcus, questioning everything she thought she knew about her father. This was the hardest part of the whole situation. Watching Emma lose some of her innocence. People sometimes do terrible things when they're scared or stressed. I said carefully, your father was grieving too, in his own way, and he was worried about money and the future. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it helps explain it. You going to make him pay for that house? I smiled. Actually, your father and I worked out a different arrangement. He's going to rent the cottage to a family from his church. A young couple with twins who needed affordable housing. The rental income will cover his payments to me, so he's not going bankrupt. No, sweetheart, he's just learned a very expensive lesson about treating people with respect. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And what about me? Are you still disappointed in me? Emma Rose Reed, I said, using her full name. The way I had when she was small. I have never been disappointed in you for one single second of your life. You stood up for what you thought was right. Even when it was hard. That takes courage. But I chose Dad over you. You chose what you believed was the truth. When you learned otherwise, you came to apologize. That takes even more courage. She hugged me again, and I felt the terrible knot in my chest finally loosen. I'd been prepared to lose Marcus's love to teach him a lesson, but losing Emma would have destroyed me. Nana, can I ask you something? Anything? Why didn't you just tell Dad about the other houses, the rental properties? If he knew you had money, maybe he wouldn't have tried to make you sell this house. It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself, because, sweetheart, real love doesn't come with conditions. If your father loved me, he should have wanted to protect me whether I had $5 or $5 million. And now, I looked out the kitchen window at the garden Harold and I had planted together, at the life we'd built in this house where I planned to grow old and die surrounded by memories and love. Now your father understands that his mother is not a helpless old woman to be managed and controlled. I'm a person who deserves respect and honesty, and if he can remember that, we'll be just fine. Emma helped me finish frosting the cake, and we talked about school and boys and her plans for college, normal grandmother-granddaughter conversation that felt like a gift after weeks of silence between us as the sun set. Marcus appeared at the back door. He looked older somehow, more serious, but also more genuine than I'd seen him in years. Mom, he said quietly, I came to wish Emma happy birthday, and to ask if we could try again. I looked at my son. Really looked at him, and saw something I'd almost given up hope of seeing. Humility. The expensive lesson had cost him money and pride, but it seemed to have returned something more valuable, his conscience. We can always try again, Marcus, I said. That's what family means. As we sat around my kitchen table eating chocolate cake and talking about Emma's sweet 16 party. I thought about the lessons we'd all learned. Marcus had learned that his mother was neither weak nor foolish. Emma had learned that standing up for the truth sometimes means admitting you were wrong. And I had learned that sometimes the people we love need consequences more than they need protection. Harold's photo smiled down at us from the mantelpiece, and I could almost hear his voice whispering in my ear, "Well done, Ellie, well done." The house was full of laughter again, but this time we were all laughing together. I was reading in Harold's chair when Patricia called with news that made me smile. Marcus's cottage rental had been so successful that he'd asked if I had any other properties available. The young family with twins had become like surrogate grandchildren to him, and he'd discovered he enjoyed being a landlord who actually cared about his tenants. He wants to know if you'd consider selling him one of the other Charleston properties, Patricia said, at fair market value. Of course, I laughed. Tell him I'll consider it. Emma had moved back in with me part-time, helping me catalogue Harold's books and learning to cook his famous jambalaya recipe. She'd started a blog about intergenerational relationships that was gaining quite a following among her classmates and Marcus. He visited every Sunday for dinner, bringing flowers and stories from his real estate business. He'd stopped treating me like an invalid and started asking for my advice again, about work, about Emma, about life. The other day, he found me in the garden and sat down beside me on Harold's old bench. "Mom," he said, "I owe you an apology, not just for the house thing, but for forgetting who you are, for seeing you as a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved. I know, sweetheart, we all forget sometimes. I hope I'm raising Emma to be as strong as you are." I smiled, watching my granddaughter chase fireflies across the lawn like she had when she was small. "You are, and Marcus. Yeah, I'm proud of you for learning from your mistakes. That's all any parent can ask for." He squeezed my hand, and for a moment we sat in comfortable silence, listening to Emma's laughter and the distant sound of jazz from a neighbor's radio. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment, it's teaching the people you love to be better than they thought they could be. Marcus had learned that his mother was stronger than he'd imagined, and I had learned that my son was better than his worst moment. In the end, that cottage cost him far more than money. It cost him his assumptions, his arrogance, and his willingness to underestimate the people who love him. But what he gained was worth infinitely more: the knowledge that respect and love go hand in hand, and that Eleanor Reed, even at 73, was nobody's fool. Harold would have been proud of all of us.